Are we streaming? Is Facebook working? Is this thing on?
Should be live now.
Yep. Okay, great. So welcome everyone. Hello, I'm Kimberly Graham. I'm a candidate for United States Senate here in Iowa to get Joni Ernst out of that seat. Maybe get somebody, I don't know, more like Tom Harkin back in it. We're here today for an incredibly important forum. We're doing a series of these forums, of these virtual events. And there are particular ones, like most people, there are certain things that are have a deep personal meaning to you as well. My brother is a person with disabilities. I want people to know that. This is something that my family, that we navigate regularly. So I want to introduce our fantastic guests. I'm super excited to have all three of you here today. And I'll just tell the little Reader's Digest version of what you provided to us as far as your biography, and then I'll let you each say whatever else you would like to say by way of introductory kind of remarks here. So we have Eric Dunot here today. Eric is from Waterloo. He's a disabilities advocate and activist, and he is on several local commissions and committees. He also volunteers with state legislators, and he is also volunteering from time to time for the Iowa Democratic Party. Welcome, Eric. What else would you like to say by way of introduction?
Not much else. I think that pretty much covers what I do, and I'm just happy to be here.
Great, thanks. And we have Gretchen Brown Weck. I've been very lucky to know Gretchen for a number of years now, and I'm super grateful that our paths crossed so many years ago. She is a deaf woman who grew up not understanding what that meant. Her primary action has been in the area of victims' rights, specifically for deaf survivors of domestic and sexual violence. And she is now the human trafficking coordinator for the Iowa Attorney General's Crime Victim Division. So welcome, Gretchen.
I'm still figuring out all of the different technology, because sometimes I have my computer, my iPad, my phone, and these headsets. So thanks, Kim. I don't really have much to add other than I've been working on broadening my scope of understanding what it means to be a person with a disability, not just being a deaf person, but also being someone who uses a wheelchair, or someone who has people who help them with daily activities. And I've been really lucky to have people who are patient enough with me to explain and answer my stupid questions. So I say that to say there are really no stupid questions, so ask away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important to realize too, to maybe state the obvious, but I think we should say it anyway, that there's a million different types of disabilities that people can have. And so sometimes when we who are not disabled, at least not in a stereotypical way, maybe, when we think of a person with disabilities, we may automatically think of a person in a wheelchair, or a person who maybe is blind or deaf or has to use a cane, but there's a million other types of disabilities. And so it's important to understand that just like any community, the community of people with disabilities is not a monolith. And so it's always important for us to listen to each other and understand different needs of different people with disabilities. So I want to introduce Tucker. Tucker Cassidy is a 44-year-old self-employed Iowan who has been living as a disabled individual with a spinal cord injury since 1994 due to an accidental gunshot. I did not know how you became disabled, Tucker. So this is the first time I read that and thought, oh, I didn't know that. He's a disabilities advocate and activist who's part of the Iowa Democratic Party Disability Caucus and part of the Upgrade Medicaid project. And he's also a member of United Spinal Iowa. So welcome, Tucker.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. I guess I don't really have much to add to that other than I also live in Waterloo, Iowa. So yeah, I get to run into Eric all the time, which is kind of nice. Well, not
so
lately.
much now.
Yeah, not so much now. But when there is not a
Yep.
pandemic, we run into each other quite often, which is also a nice thing.
Yep. So I would like to, I just want to check so far. I don't see, I'm just note to Tim on my team here, who's here from my team. Christine King on our, sent us a message in chat. Tim, I don't know if you see, she just says she can't really hear. So you might just check with her privately and see if that's been fixed or, okay, great. Thanks, Tim. So there's a million things we could talk about. We only have about an hour or a little more. Sometimes I cheat and we go over an hour. These are supposed to be an hour, but sometimes the conversation takes longer than an hour. But to me, the most important job of a US Senator is to listen. And if you aren't hearing what people are telling you they need to live lives of health and dignity, how can you know what you should be going to DC or the State House in Des Moines, wherever, to advocate for? And so my number one goal as a US Senator is to listen. And then my number two goal is to listen. My number three goal is to listen. And then down the road, it's then develop policies and plans and try to go advocate for those things. But it starts with listening. And I want to say up front that we are all works in progress. I am far from perfect. I'm trying to learn all the time. More things I need to know to be able to better advocate for people. For people who don't know, for 20 years, I've been an attorney and guardian ad litem for abused children in the Iowa courts and for parents. Primarily, I've done a few other types of law, but that's been my biggest focus. In the last 2 years, I've been the attorney and guardian ad litem for the Polk County Recovery Court program. So I represent all the kids of the participants in the Polk County Family Treatment Court program, or recovery court, we call it. So I've spent 20 years listening to people and standing up and fighting for them. And I hope to do that as US Senator. So that starts with listening. So I'd love to hear from each of you. Maybe we can just go around to start the conversation of, what's a thing or two that just pops into your mind as some of the biggest issues that, at least from your perspective on a federal level, I realize there may be a lot of state stuff, and we can certainly talk about that too, needs to be addressed. Like, I know Medicaid is a joke. And so we need to talk about a lot of different things. Gretchen, do you want to, well, I'm just going to go around like clockwise on my screen anyway, which would be Gretchen. So Gretchen, do you want to let us know an issue or two that we need to get going on this or that soon?
Well, it's right now for the deaf community, we're seeing everything go backwards. Mm-hmm. For example, there is never an interpreter present for the federal coronavirus briefings, which, may not be a bad thing, but people are deaf have the right to determine whether they want to listen to Dover or not. And that's just like one symbol of how access has gone backwards at the federal level. At least it seems like there's no understanding of the fact that everybody has the right to the same level of access. Right now, with the medical issues, we're seeing so many people struggling. Me personally, with the masking, I go out in public and I just pretend that I'm in my own little bubble because I can't communicate with anybody. And that's okay, because I'm actually naturally kind of an introvert / hermit / as a social human. But when it's very weird, Kim, because there seems to be so much more awareness at the public level, but at the federal level, we're seeing these steps backwards in terms of communication access. And I mean, that's not even looking at the issues that the deafblind community has, especially right now. The deafblind community communicates through touch. And, you know, that's just not, it's a lot because it's so absurd and awful. But really, it's just a matter of, we feel like the Americans with Disabilities Act has been gutted for our community. I'm not speaking for anybody else's community, but for us, it really feels that way. I think that's probably my biggest issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know, and I think, and I'm not making excuses for myself, but number one, I don't watch the federal COVID-19 briefings very often because in my opinion, there's not much good information and it's just a shit show. I do listen to Dr. Fauci when he appears like on news shows separately because he has something, you know, smart to say. So all that to say, I didn't notice when I have seen it, I didn't realize that there was no sign language interpreter at those briefings. And I should have noticed that. And now, of course, I will. Every time I watch it, I'll be thinking, where's the damn interpreter?
Well, I will say, I'll also side at the state level, because we had not just our community, but all of our allies calling our governor's offices saying, why do you not have an interpreter at these briefings? Now we've got Kaylin there for every single briefing.
Mhm.
So we do have a voice, and it works sometimes.
Yeah.
So I would say that, but yeah, I am with you on whether or not it's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Eric, what is your kind of top, when I say, hey, what do we need to do better on faster? What kinds of things come to mind for you?
Federally, like I said in our communication before the forum, was we need to have more than subminimal pay for people who work in sheltered workshops or work activity centers. Because if we want people who work in those settings to believe that they're actually having a job, that they have a job and that it's worth it, they need to be paid like what they're doing is a job. Because if anybody who was not disabled was asked to work for 6 pennies an hour, I don't think anybody would. But yet we have people with disabilities that are expected to accept that as a life and that that's okay, because we have this federal mandate since 1938, and that law needs to be changed, and whatever goes along with it in terms of SSI or SSDI or any of those regulations with those programs need to be changed to accommodate for that.
Mhm.
Because I'm basically working as a volunteer, but in those volunteer positions, I have more dignity doing those positions with legislators and other people, and my commissions and my committees that I'm on give me more dignity than what is assumed when Republicans talk about the dignity of work.
Mhm.
Nope, my experience at the shelter workshop, there was nothing dignified about that. And when I run around with Representative Timmy Brown Powers down at the Capitol, or Senator Liz Mathis down at the Capitol, as I said, just being in that setting means that I have more dignity doing that and more power and more influence.
Mhm.
Just doing that kind of activity than anybody working at the shelter workshop would ever dream of having.
Right.
So I think that would be jobs for people with disabilities and inclusion
Mhm.
of people with disabilities in a normal setting would be something that I would, one of the things I would concentrate on.
Mhm.
Yeah, I remember last fall, I believe it was, I think all of you were there too at the, I forget, the accessibility inclusion
Outreach.
outreach. I never can remember what the
Yeah.
O stands for.
Mhm.
I'm always going, accessibility inclusion. What does the O stand for? Outreach.
Mhm.
At that conference, Senator Tom Harkin spoke at that conference, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about. And is it 30th anniversary last year, I think, of the Americans with Disabilities Act?
It's this year in July.
This year. Okay.
Mhm.
This year. And, you know, I'm old enough, I'm 55, to remember when that was passed. I'm old enough to remember what a fight it was. Even as a younger person, I remember hearing about it on the news a lot and how businesses didn't want it for the most part. I'm sure there were some that did, but for the most part, the business community was against it. And it just shows that, yes, that was fantastic. It kind of propelled us a long way in a quick amount of time. And as Tom Harkin said, we have so far to go. And there's certain even parts of even the ADA that to this day have not really been fully implemented or enforced. From my understanding, enforcement is a huge issue. It's one thing to say you have to do these things, and it's another when nobody's ever going to do anything to you if you don't. You're never going to get a fine. Nobody's ever going to, tell you need to do something different. And one of the things that Senator Harkin talked about, Eric, was ending that sub-minimum wage. Unfortunately, I'm embarrassed to say that I think until maybe a couple of years ago, I did not know about that. I just didn't know. I assumed if you were a person with disabilities working, that you at least were subject to the ridiculous $7.25 an hour federal minimum wage, which is also ridiculous. So, I believe everybody who works should get a $15 an hour minimum wage, period. Period. And that probably is quickly not becoming enough. My understanding is the idea behind the federal minimum wage was when they were talking and negotiating about passing that back in the day, was that it should be enough in most parts of the country for a two-parent family and a baby or a child to survive on one of the people working on a minimum wage, on the federal minimum wage. And back when it was passed, it was. It was. And so if that's the idea, then we have to immediately, over double it and then index it and have it go up over time. And I do understand, because I traveled to 87 counties out of 99 before we had to pull the plug on seeing people in person. I understand that that's really tough to pay $15 an hour if you are a very small mom and pop business in a rural community, maybe, or you're in just an economically disadvantaged area and you're barely making enough as the business owner to get by and pay people at a lower wage. Well, I have an easy answer for that. Let's stop subsidizing Exxon and Walmart and Amazon and all this other stuff. And let's start giving real tax breaks and incentives to small mom and pop businesses so that they can afford to pay a $15 an hour minimum wage. Because when we do that, it's like an upward spiral. There's going to be more money in the community and more people to spend it. It'll create more jobs and it'll grow their economy, especially in some of these smaller towns. But all that to say, I agree with you 100%, Eric. And it's like the way we've set things up structurally, systematically for people with disabilities, we are intentionally keeping them from having higher income. And there's no reason why, because you're a person with disabilities, that you shouldn't be able to make a higher than poverty level standard of living, that you shouldn't be able to have, a middle income or whatever income.
And I was going to add, Kim, that if we want people to think that working is worth it, I should not be able to make more money not working than I would if I was working at the shelter workshop or another setting that would be adapted for people with disabilities. I mean, if we want people to think it's worth it, then don't pay them, less than you would pay a prisoner or less than you would pay a child for an allowance. So
That's a good one. I like that.
that's my contribution there.
Yeah, I agree. Tucker, what comes to your mind about like what are the biggest issues or the top of mind for you issues that you think we need
Tucker,
to
can
address?
you hear me? Tucker,
What?
can you hear me talking?
I
Tucker?
can.
Yeah, we can all hear you, Jan.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you know that I'm on. After Tucker speaks, may I speak? Can you hear me?
Yeah, Jan, could you hold on just 1 minute so Tucker
Yes,
can?
after Tucker speaks, could I speak? Because I don't see me on here. So I just didn't know if you could see me or not. That's all.
I can't see you, but I can hear you.
How do I get myself on here? I don't know how to get my face on here.
Yeah. Tim will send you. Tim, can you send Jan a private message about how to get her camera working?
I appreciate that. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure you saw me.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yep. Tim from my team will message you privately, and you should be able to see it down in the chat, but it'll be a private message to you. So yeah, we'll come back and we'll talk to Jan in just a second. So Tucker, what are your thoughts? What's top of mind for you?
Wow. Well, Christian and Eric really brought up a lot. So I guess number one, just to kind of piggyback off of what Eric was saying, that the thing that we've got to really think about is that that we need to respect that people with disabilities are people, and that they have just as much worth as a person who is, quote, able-bodied is. That we also bring to the table like qualification, skills, things that are unique to our experiences that we can bring to a job, that are unique to we just have the ability to look at things because of the lifestyles that we have to live through our disabilities, that bring more to the table, and that should be respected and should be paid for what it's worth, so that we don't have to volunteer to have dignity, so that we can work those kinds of jobs and actually be paid for the expertise that we bring to them. So, I mean, a lot of that, and the way to do that, though, is to, we need to create access, right? I mean, with access comes ability. So falling back on what you were talking about with Tom Harkin, the granddaddy of the ADA, what the ADA was set out to do was to create that access so that people with disabilities could not just patronize businesses, but also work in them, and yet we're not there 30 years later. So one of the main things that I've been pushing on everybody that I can talk to about it on the federal level is to support the Disability Integration Act, which is, and you can read all about it at disabilityintegrationact.org on the interwebs. If you just do just a Google search for that, the Disability Integration Act, you can read all about it. It's a bipartisan bill, both in the Senate and in the House at the federal level, that really aims to fill in a lot of the gaps that the Supreme Court's groundbreaking Olmstead decision, which is another thing that you can research, as well as the ADA. It addresses the gaps in those things, so that we are then able to live in our communities, work in our communities, provide employment to other people that may or may not have disabilities, and become players in the great game of capitalism, so that we can actually be part of America like everyone else can.
Yeah.
So that's my long-winded way of saying access equals everything, and we should be paid for what we're worth.
Absolutely. I was recently listening to a podcast. I'm a big fan of Jonathan Van Ness, and he has a weekly podcast called Getting Curious. For those of you who don't know, he's one of the people who is one of the stars of the Queer Eye show on Netflix.
Okay.
Anyway, and extraordinarily smart, and he's had a weekly podcast for a number of years, and he has on the most amazing guests. And he recently had a gentleman who has disabilities who lives in New York City. And they were talking about how the subway system and the bus system, to some extent even, and for sure the subway, the whole subway, is still not accessible after
Really?
all these years. And New York City keeps saying, we're working on it, we're working on it, we're working on it. And
For
that's
30
millions,
years?
and that's millions and millions of people who should be able, who live in New York City, and I'm sure hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people with disabilities who should be able to access the subway system. And because this gentleman cannot access it, it takes him like an hour and a half to get to work, and it could take him 20 minutes if he could get on the damn subway. And so when we talk about just simple, even transportation accessibility,
Right.
On one level, like a very concrete thing we can think about, we're ripping ourselves off as
Right.
a nation when we don't include people with disabilities, when we cut them out of access, because the economics, if you only care, which I don't, but if you only cared about the dollars and cents of it, if that's all you cared about, we would have a stronger economy if more people could participate in it, and they're being excluded because of a lot of these fairly simple, accessibility issues.
Because once you have an infrastructure in place that allows everybody to have access, then you're including so many more people. Because what's the statistic that we typically kind of fall back on? Is it 1 in 5 people typically have a disability in America? So that's a lot of people, and to cut all of them out of having the opportunity to not just benefit from the economy but contribute and actually be part of that is huge. It doesn't make economic sense to leave us out, to be honest. With just a minimal bit of incentive and a minimal amount of investment, we can give back a lot more in the long run.
Right. And I'm very careful. Even though my platform and my positions certainly align most strongly with Senator Warren and Senator Sanders, you will not hear me say free college, free healthcare, free, because I'm a lawyer, I don't know. I like to mean what I say and say what I mean, and they're not free.
They're not.
So what I say, though, and what you just said, Tucker, reminded me of this. What I say all the time is investments. We've got to make investments in healthcare. We've got to make investments in children. We've got to make investments in transportation for people with disabilities and other accessibility ways to make things accessible for people with disabilities. We've got to make investments in affordable housing, and not just affordable housing, but universal design affordable housing, so that anyone with any kind of disability or a person without a disability can use that home or that apartment. Because I know from my understanding is that we all know how almost impossible it is to find decent affordable housing in this country. Well, now try to find decent accessible housing if you're in a wheelchair or you have some other physical disability.
Yeah.
Good luck to you.
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
it's almost impossible. It is ridiculous. And that's that, to kind of connect it to another piece, because these are all interconnected pieces. They're all interconnected. The Green New Deal, what I love about the Green New Deal is it addresses the climate crisis, and it calls for investments in things like new affordable housing. Well, if we have new affordable green, carbon neutral housing being built, we better make sure that it's all universally designed too. And I don't think that we have enough people in positions of power at the federal level who have these issues at the top of their mind so that these things get incorporated into new things like the Green New Deal potentially, or other sorts of infrastructure improvements.
Certainly not in the current administration.
No,
No.
no. Hey, Jan.
Hi, I
So,
appreciate you. Thank you very much for
thank
inviting me.
you. Thank you for being here. What would you like to say?
I'm in a situation right now where um, I, I'm born with a spina bifida, cervical spina bifida. I'm 20 years past my life expectancy. I was research project for Des Moines University because Mayo Clinic has never seen anyone be able to do what I can do with the diagnosis I was given. However, with the private, and I have a degree from UNI in education, so I've worked for 23 years with the Ames Community School District. When the Olmstead Act, there was this consumer choice options budget program, and it started out in 7 states. When it was in Iowa was one of them. I was the first one of the first to participate. And for 3 years, I was on the Iowa Department of Human Services, DHS Iowa website, promoting this program. Because and then they got a different director and he changed it all. However, since it privatized insurance, this is my current situation right now. The privatized insurance has stated, we're not up, you will never be cured. We're not obligated to maintain for your only maintenance, and we're not obligated to maintain maintenance program. So I have been denied physical therapy, everything else that I have been that supported my lifestyle, my quality of lifestyle. I am now currently in the hospital with injury to kidney, 75% oxygen, cellulitis from ankle to groin, respiratory. I have water on my lungs now. So I have Disability Rights of Iowa. I'm on my 4th MCO. I have Disability Rights of Iowa helping me. I came home from a nursing home. I just walked out of that freaking nursing home and came home in November. My contract is supposed to have changed and renewed with, my exception to policy was approved. Iowa Total Care did not like what was approved, so without the permission of myself, without the permission, thank you, without the permission of Disability Rights, they submitted a second exception to policy. I've never been granted a notice of decision, but because they did not like the first exception to policy, they submitted a second one. Now we're waiting. That was the beginning of March. I was supposed to have this all taken care of in December. It is now going into May, and they have requested that I continue with the same one into May. So maybe June, maybe. And if the second, so whoever they submitted it to doesn't know that the first one was approved, they didn't like it, they're not going to, just snubbing the nose of the attorney and just not even acknowledging what she's saying to him. She's saying to them, you need to abide by the first exception to policy. They're just totally ignoring her. I have never seen anybody be able to go to snub their freaking nose at the law and say, then, I don't have to do what you say. And in reality, they're saving maybe a few bucks, but I am freaking literally dying here. I'm a little bit angry, as you can tell.
Rightfully so.
I would be too. Jan.
It's been
Absolutely.
2 months now since the Disability Rights of Iowa has been on my case, and all they do is write these letters. Please, 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 would you abide by what you're supposed to abide by? Oh my God.
Well,
I have
and
no idea. I'm sorry. I just don't know what to say about it.
yeah, no, you have nothing to be sorry about. Governor Reynolds and the all of these private Medicaid companies have a lot to be ashamed and sorry about.
It didn't start with Reynolds. It started with Branstad.
Well, sure, yeah.
And now she gets to be the captain of the ships.
What do
Yeah.
I do about it? If disability rights of attorney cannot get them to do whatever to abide by, do you understand? They sent a second ETP. They don't even know the first one was approved.
Mhm.
So they're just going to go by what the latest one was.
Right.
And they didn't like the first one. So how
Right.
many more ETPs am I going to have to go through before they go, oh, well, maybe. And the reason why is because I was approved for the dollar amount. You're talking about the wages. My caregivers are getting freaking $8 an hour. And now, oh, that's just too much. If you could have them go down just a little bit more, you could get more hours. What the hell?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Nobody wants to work for that.
No, no.
I don't have anybody left.
They have such a broad range of issues.
Mhm.
And Jan, I am so sorry listening to you. Makes me so angry. And I just feel so hopeless because there's so much that we need to fix in this world. And you are, not to be funny, but you are a poster child for everything that's wrong with the system.
Mhm.
But
I don't know what to do. If I have a lawyer
trying
who
to
can't
live,
do anything, what
you're
else
trying
can
to
I
live
do?
your life. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I
I-
just want to say I'm sorry that you're dealing with it.
I just feel like, oh, well, if she passes away, well, that's just one less person we have to deal with.
And you know what? So Jan, I mean, you're you're doing everything you can do. I'm so sorry you're going through this, and it makes me so angry. Like it makes Gretchen. I'm sure it makes all of us hearing and listening to you, because no human being should be treated this way, and it shouldn't matter whether you're maintenance only, whether you're not going to get better or not. Anything that will increase your quality of life while you are still here should be paid for, period. I don't care whether you're terminally ill or you're not. And we just, this isn't going to help you today or next week, but this is why I like being a lawyer, because sometimes, not always, but sometimes I can make a call. I can say, hey, I'm so-and-so's lawyer, and I can make things happen that otherwise, unfortunately, don't happen.
Mhm.
And I hope to God that I make it to the United States Senate. It's an uphill battle because I don't have any corporate money behind me, because this is exactly why I want to be a United States Senator. Because I hope that that position of power will give me the ability to be able to hear about your situation, Jan, and people like you. And it will give me that power that title brings you, unwarranted as it is, to be able to contact and say, what the hell is going on with Jan Driesman's case? This is Senator Kimberly Graham. And it's
Brian
unfortunate,
Sandler
but
is-
sometimes that's what it takes.
Brian Sandler is the CEO for Iowa Total Care.
Mhm.
He just freaking blew me off. So I appreciate you being a senator. I'll probably be dead by the time you get to that point. Because nobody seems to be able to know what the hell to do.
Right. I mean, the only thing I would say is what you're already doing, which is,
That ain't getting me nowhere.
right. Yep.
So if you have any solution now, would be really grateful.
Yep. Jan, do you have an email address?
DEACHMS@gmail.com.
What was the first part?
Teach Ms.
Oh.
Juiceman. I'm sorry, Gretchen. I don't mean to make you guys so upset. I don't know how else to tell you.
No, Jan, you and people like you are exactly the reason why we're doing a forum on people with disabilities, because people need to understand what is really happening out there, and that you are, unfortunately, you're here, and I'm so glad that you are here, but there's 10 or 100 or 1,000 of people, 10,000 people behind you in this country who are in exactly the same position.
Right.
Where these privatized Medicaid companies are denying therapies and treatments and things that would increase somebody's quality of life while they are still alive, whether they're terminally ill or not, or would help them to live a longer life. And that's just, it's just not okay.
What I've done is all of my medical team will write prescriptions and they'll just deny it. They have mooted everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, we're not going to let the doctors do what they need to do. We're going to tell you we're going to decide what you can have and what you can't have.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, I should be, by Disability Rights of Iowa, I should be under the skilled care level. And they are continually going. So what they do is instead of taking the case to the assessment to the Iowa Medicaid Enterprise, they take it back to their MCO private assessment people. And they're the ones who actually assess whether you're on skilled level or nursing level. Nursing level is $950. I had a judge award me $2,300. It is now the exception to policy is trying to get it up to $1,700. That's only to pay for my workers. And when AmeriHealth, when I won that case with AmeriHealth, the disability rights lawyer wanted me to understand exactly what I was up against. So she had me talk physically to the lawyer that represents the whole company. And that lawyer said, I don't care what that judge says. We're not going to do it. So they waited until they pulled out of Iowa, and then they gave it over to United Health or something like that. So I'm like on my fourth one. And every time they go, well, we don't know what we're doing. We don't know what the previous one does. So our assessment tells us that you're only at 950.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get physical therapy anymore. I used to be a freaking research project because nobody could see nobody has ever done what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's just nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I could just keep on and on.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry.
No.
Well, can I just offer one thing to Jan? After we have our discussion about like just the system at large and how it's failing and what we can do to fix it. I think I'll contact you because I want to help. I know that there are some ways that just to say out loud that the Ombudsman's office and local legislators, and if you don't know who they are, I'll put you in touch with them and give you their contact info, because those are the types of people. When any of you that are hearing this live stream or on this live stream right now, if you know anyone that's in a similar situation to Jan, that's who you need to contact. You need to make sure that you contact the DHS, the Iowa Ombudsman's office. State Auditor's office is another avenue to go to Disability Rights Iowa, like Jan has already done, and local legislators. And just if you can get to them and explain your situation in a concise manner, they can do their best to help. So that's one thing where it's just irritating and it's horrible. And I am so happy that you were so willing to share your story with all of us, especially in this forum, because yeah, it's not easy to do that, Jan.
Spoken to
Truly
Edmonton.
appreciate it.
And when you talk about talking to the legislature,
Mhm.
I'm doing everything I can just to keep out of the hospital. So
Right.
what you're asking me to do is I'm surviving.
Mhm.
I don't have the energy to do what you're asking. I tried. I just don't, because I'm just trying to keep myself above. I'm trying to keep my job of 23 years. I'm trying to keep my apartment. I'm trying to do everything I can just to survive.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Well,
unfortunately, you're not alone.
yeah. Well, Jan, that's why I asked for your email. I'll email you after this is over as well. And I don't know what I'm gonna be able to do, but I will do whatever I can do. I know you don't have the energy, nor should you be expected to go around shaking a bunch of these trees, but I do. Even though I'm still working and running a US Senate campaign, believe me, I do, and I will. So I don't know what I'll be able to do, but I'm happy to try, and that's all we can do. So,
I
I
do
will-
appreciate everybody. I do. Thank you, Tucker. Thank you.
yeah, we see you.
Yeah, I'm on my glory here in the hospital. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you were here. I'm glad that you were here to make us aware. And again, you are unfortunately one of thousands of people in your situation across this country and in the wealthiest nation on earth. This should never, ever, ever be happening to anyone. And it doesn't happen in other nations.
Right. That's just the thing, right? It doesn't have to happen.
Tucker, can I make a comment real quick on MCOs? And I just wanted to piggyback off what Jan said about what's going on with her situation. It's unfortunate that our legislators have this extra job now, aside from being our state legislators and doing all the Iowa state legislator activities that they have to do as part of their job. Now they have to be basically an amateur lawyer or an advocate for all the people that they have to be an advocate for when we come with our issues because MCOs aren't doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. And
Right.
And why can't MCOs just do the job that they've been asked to do
Mhm.
instead of having to be told by our legislators or somebody like Kim, who's a lawyer, and needing to have that person just, kick them in the behind to just get them to do the job that they should have been doing in the first place without being told.
And
And
I think DHS is also behind some of the scrutiny.
well, I know the whole Iowa government, the administration of the governor is sort of behind the whole situation. But what I'm saying is now, instead of just being a legislator and doing one job, legislators are also doing this other job, making sure that MCOs are doing their job. So that's unfortunate. And I think that's what frustrates me about the whole situation with dealing with the MCOs.
Mhm.
Yes.
So that's my contribution.
Tucker, is it true that what Eric is that what is I going to say? The MCOs are going to the legislature and saying, "Oh, it's a technical error, and we need to fix the technical error." Is that true? And that's how they're changing the law, the policies in Iowa. They're not saying we're changing the policies. They're actually just saying, "Well, this has been a technical error in your policy books, and so we're going to get that corrected through the legislature." And that's how they're. And so I've been told that they have a certain amount of money that is given to them every month per person, and whatever they can keep in their pocket and not give to the person, then that's their profit. Is that true? Those are some questions.
That's what you get when you have for-profit companies delivering healthcare.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that's what ends up happening. When on the flip side, if you think about this, if they were to keep you healthier and happier and in your home, think about how much less money they would be spending right now.
I have been in
Because,
the hospital 7 or 8 times. because of
right.
that. Yeah.
And think about how much it costs to get care in a hospital versus getting home care or providing that care to yourself.
But I've been told that the waiver, the state has to provide money for the waiver. And when you're in a nursing home, then the waiver, the state doesn't provide that, needs to provide that money anymore. That they actually get federal money to
Mhm.
babysit you in the nursing home. Is that true?
I believe that that's how it works. It's from a separate pool of money. And this kind of brings me to another thing, because I know that Kimberly's running for, a federal level position here. So, one of the things that I think that would help these situations from happening in the first place, because the federal government does have a say in how Medicaid is run. So, when a state but the state has the choice in whether or not to go to a managed care sort of situation to have like private companies run their Medicaid program, because taxpayer money pays for it. So CMS, who basically is Medicare, or it's the federal government, one of my ideas has been policy-wise for the federal government to be like, okay, if you want to go to a managed care, say, Iowa, you want to go to a managed care for your Medicaid system, that's fine, but we need to be able to have oversight so that those persons' taxpayer dollars are actually going towards the care that they need in such a fashion that isn't killing them or putting them in a position that is making their health outcomes worse, because it doesn't make any sense on its face, and it's just a waste of money, and it's a waste of life. So, I mean, really, it just gives states a proper and more accurate idea of like how our taxpayer money is being spent through having oversight. And unfortunately, in our state, the party in power has pushed off oversight to the MCOs themselves. So that is something I think that the federal government can do, since CMS does oversee. They do allocate money for each state, and then the state gets to figure out what they want to do with their Medicaid funds. So, I mean, I have that right, Eric? I could be a little bit wrong, but because
Yeah,
Eric is a policy wonk.
no, I was going to add, I wasn't sure about all the details, but I think you do have it right. But I was going to add that in 2018, a group of our legislators went to Washington, D.C. with a letter to CMS saying, we want you to tell Iowa to adjust what they have to do under the waiver or not accept the waiver. And I don't think the federal government, especially under the Trump administration, obviously, went along with what the Iowa state legislators who sent the letter wanted. So nothing ever changed. But there was a group of legislators that were trying to make an effort toward the changes that at least our legislators wanted. So there have been efforts. It's just the majority party have rebuffed Democratic efforts at every level. So it's not like our Democratic legislators haven't been trying. It's just that they have not. Their efforts have not been accepted.
Mm-hmm.
So
You got to vote. Everybody's got to vote.
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, really, I know it doesn't help people today, but changing the makeup of the United States Senate and changing the makeup of the Iowa House and Senate and the governor's mansion is how we're going. It's unfortunately, that's how in the longer term, we're going to fix these problems at the root. and not have to try to advocate and pitch, and fix them and put band-aids on them because the system just isn't working at all right now. And so people don't go to the polls on June 2nd. Do not vote by mail, and you can vote now. You should be getting an absentee ballot request in the form, or absentee ballot request form in the mail. Fill that out. It's pre-stamped. You don't even need a stamp. Fill it out. Make sure you sign all the highlighted areas. Send that in. They'll send you a ballot. Fill that all out. Sign it. Do all the highlighted areas. And they're both stamped, ready to go. So you don't even need to find a stamp. So please vote by mail. But Jan, I will definitely send you an email and see if there's anything that I can do, or to be in touch with your lawyers at Disability Rights Iowa to see if they have any suggestions for me, as another attorney who could do something if they need extra help on your case or whatever. I don't know what's possible, but I'll find out.
I'm not negating what they're doing. I'm just frustrated that nothing has been changed. Part
Right.
of it is also educating the public,
Mm-hmm.
because what I have been, I'm 60 some years old. So I'm I'm out in the public all the time where I live. And what I've noticed hearing is that people like, well, why should I provide my taxes to go to this? How do I say that? People are being very conservative. Like they go, I don't want to pay my taxes for this. It doesn't involve me. Does that make sense what I'm saying? And so people need to be educated that how the MCOs are behaving now with this population is how they're going to behave with them in their business insurance company. And people just don't.
It really can. I came to this realization when I was running a nonprofit that sometimes you can't make people care about other people. I shouldn't say sometimes, I'm being optimistic, I know, but sometimes you have to find the bottom line because that's all they care about. So like you were saying, Eric and Tucker, it would be so much more fiscally conservative to give people the services that they need.
Mm-hmm.
So how is this making any sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's where, my big dollar sign, it frustrates me because it is, yeah, it really is. Because that's not even true. But if that's all that they care about, okay, find a way to show them.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you're doing to your almighty wallet, which I will reserve my words on my opinion of that mindset. But Tim, you probably know what those words are. Tucker and Eric have probably heard a few.
A lot.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
true. I mean, it's just we have to start electing people who put people over profits, and it's not just a pithy saying, it's really true. And it's not that we don't need profitable companies, we do, but they're not exclusionary, and we're fed this false narrative that it's people or profits, or at least it appears that a lot of people believe that, and it's not. And also, when you put people over profits, you're probably going to have more profits, because everybody is going to be healthier and happier. So it's this very, very short-sighted
Yes.
way of looking at things, Yeah.
I pay taxes. I've worked since I was 16.
Yeah.
I have paid taxes since
Same here.
ever. Where are my tax dollars going?
Right.
And so with the few legislators I have spoken with, it goes over their head. There's so many things that they have to promote in their campaign.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so many things. I just don't think that they can keep up with everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it just kind of is something that I have found goes over their head. So I appreciate you listening.
You're welcome. I think that's the job. That's the first part of the job. If you don't do the first part, then you have no chance at succeeding at the second part, which is going and trying to get those things that make people's lives better, because you never listened to what was going to make their life better in the first place. So how did you know? So that makes sense. And we have this huge problem in this country that it costs so much money to run for office
Oh gosh, yeah.
that very few people can do it. And I mean, I just am very lucky. I have this perfect storm of things where I'm able to do it, but to be just blunt, it's harmful to me financially, very much so, because I've had to scale back my practice so that I'm working very few hours so that I can afford to have the time that's necessary to make a legitimate run for this office.
Mhm.
And I'm hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt for student loans still from my own education because of that whole system. Yeah, it all goes back to money. And that's why, as silly as it sounds, it makes sense when you understand that, why so many people who kind of see all these pieces interlocking keep saying that we've got to get publicly funded elections. We've
Mhm.
got to keep working for publicly funded elections. And the reason for
Right.
that is because until we do, we're not going to see teachers and nurses and grocery store clerks and waitresses being able to run for office. There's always that one in a million, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who
Right.
is kind of an outlier who decided to do it anyway and makes it through somehow.
Mhm.
But she didn't get there alone. Toward the end of her campaign, and I could be wrong about this, but I think toward the end of her campaign, Senator Sanders found out about her and helped her. Like he either sent out emails fundraising for her or something. I don't know all the details, but my point is nobody gets here alone. Nobody gets elected to office alone. And if you are a person of few resources and you aren't already connected to wealthy and well-connected people
Mhm.
that you can call and ask for a $2,800 donation for your campaign, then your chances of making it to office are low. It's no accident why the DSCC and the DCCC choose and endorse candidates who are almost universally already wealthy people, already wealthy and well-connected people.
Mhm.
And it's not that wealthy and well-connected people are bad people. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that's a different life.
Mhm.
And
And we don't have people with disabilities.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
yep. And the chances of a person with disabilities, by and large, who don't live very financially prosperous lives in this country, being able to make it into elected office so that we actually have people with disabilities in positions of power is even slimmer.
Right.
So we've got to change the way that we elect people to power in this country because it matters a lot. We're lucky in this particular race because I don't waste my time. I'm a pretty pragmatic person. We're lucky that this is still, we think, a pretty open primary because we're a
Absolutely.
small population state. And only about, get ready for this because it's horrible, but only about 150,000 people typically vote in a contested primary election in the state of Iowa. Out of 2 million registered voters,
I know.
only about 150,000 people are going to vote. And we don't know this time. We don't know this time how many, because this is a whole, we've never done this before with the mail thing.
You know
So
what?
the point
You know
is that we
what?
have a chance
We
to
don't
win.
know.
We have a chance to win because we have so few votes we need to get. And so let's take that chance, people.
Well,
I'm
and
just saying that we don't know the importance of primary elections in this country. We don't know the importance of local elections. That it's all about the presidential candidates. It's all about all of that. I just turned 50 years old, and I will freely admit that it wasn't until 5 years ago that I understood how important it was to vote in every freaking election.
Mhm.
So, I mean, again, we have this whole wide gamut of things from we need publicly funded elections to we need to get Jan some freaking help So it takes all of it because none of us have the energy or the time or the resources to do it all.
Hmm.
And people don't think that they have a voice. People genuinely don't. They don't understand that it's the primary elections, it's the local elections that matter
Hmm.
so much more than those broads in the White House. I'm trying to keep it clean, Cam. I'm trying.
But you know, think about how much more elected officials would get done if they didn't have to run for their next election and we're constantly
Immediately
trying-
after the one that they just won.
Right, exactly. If they, you know, they're turning around and working so hard all of the time and using so much of their energy to just raise money to run for office.
Yep.
Think about how much more legislation could be done, how many more bills could be passed, how many more things that slog along for 20 years could have gotten done within 5 or 2 or 1, because it gets drug out so long because there's constantly that machine that would, if we just had publicly funded elections, it would just take care of that and people would run on the merits.
The never-ending campaign of always running for an election.
Right.
Right. Yeah. I really don't know how people in the House of Representatives with only 2-year terms, I understand the desire to turn over those seats with the hope of getting fresh people into office.
Yeah. Sure.
But to me, those terms should be at least 3, maybe 4 years, for the simple reason that, again, and I would say that whether they're a Republican or a Democrat, it's ridiculous to have people be literally elected and the next week have to start fundraising for their election 2 years down the road. I agree with you,
Mhm.
Tucker. We waste so much time and money doing that. What could happen to all the money? We don't need to spend billions of dollars a year on elections, and we do. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm ashamed, to be blunt, I'm ashamed that I have raised $221,000 as of yesterday since June of last year. And what I'm ashamed of is, what could that money have done?
Yeah.
What if those people, instead of donating all those $221,000 to my campaign, could they have given that elsewhere and invested it elsewhere in their communities, or kept it for themselves for something they needed to do?
Right.
And we have mostly small dollar donors. Our average donation is $25. So we have a lot of $1, $5 donations, a lot of those who are desperate for change and can't give $1,000 to a candidate.
And
you know,
especially in these COVID times where, as a campaign, I don't care who you are, you're really not doing anything right now anyways, in terms of public events, in terms of crowd events is what I'm talking about. You're not doing those activities that it would take donations to fund having those activities. Well, those activities aren't going on now. And
Right.
so maybe the money could have gone someplace different.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In these times especially.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you, since of course I'm an expert on this at the moment, we have 5 full-time staffers, and that's tiny for a US Senate campaign. We have 5 full-time staffers, which is a very small number of people to run a US Senate campaign. And we have an army of volunteers. And to be really honest, we're all working 12 to 16 hours a day, even without in-person events, because we're replacing all of our in-person events with events like this, which still require graphic design, and they still require publicizing them, and they still require reaching out to get the guests and interfacing with all the guests, and on and on and on and on. And that all takes time. We still have our website where people are going to go to find out about our campaign when they get their ballot in the mail. So we have to continuously improve our website. We have to still manage connections to people we're trying to get endorsements from so that we get more votes because people know that so-and-so endorsed us. So even though we're not in-person eventing, I'm actually busier than I was when we were in person doing all those in-person events, strangely enough. And some of that's because the closer you get to the actual election day, the more you have to keep all these plates spinning in the air. But, you know, but all that said, I agree. I mean, and I've raised a tenth by the way, I won the Des Moines Register MediaCom poll among the 5 Democrats running. It was done in early March. We had the most name recognition and the highest favorability rating on 1/10 of the money that one of the top fundraising candidate has raised. So that's why I say, even though we don't have the corporate money behind us, I believe that we're in an interesting situation here in Iowa that we would not be in California or New York or Chicago, where you'd have to reach millions of voters. We only have to reach about 55,000 voters. That's our win number for the primary. And if we can get past the primary, then we'll have all the other resources come at us for the general, because lots of people are going to want to flip this seat. So,
Well, and one thing that I really appreciate about your campaign is that you are having an event like this where you're reaching out to the disability community, because again, 1 in 5 people, and that means in Iowa too, is a disabled person. And if you are the type of person where, you know, you want to reach out to us and hear our stories and understand our issues to the point where you then have an understanding and can advocate at the federal level, you know, we're going to show up and we're going to vote. You know, we're going to fill out our ballots, you know, whether it be at the polling place, or if we're able to do that at that point, or, you know, absentee, which most of us probably will be using, because most people with disabilities end up using absentee ballots. But, you know, that's the kind of thing that we want to see. We want these kinds of conversations. And, you know, if we have more people reaching out to our community, we're definitely going to show our support. So
I want to point out something that people with disabilities already know, but if you're a person without a disability, understand that if you're a person without a disability today, you're going to eventually age into having a disability.
right.
Most people in nursing homes, because they are in care homes or aged homes or whatever you want to call them, they end up having a disability, and that's why they're there. And so whether you have a disability now or you don't, you're going to age into having it anyways. So,
and not to be morbid or anything, but, you know, you can go along like I was, you know, 19 years of life, and just one afternoon, everything changes
yep.
due to an accident, something that absolutely never in a million years would I've been able to say, oh yeah, I'm going to get shot someday. You just never know. You never know. And, you know, all of us, and I've said this in speeches that I've made before in front of people, that all of us are a heartbeat away from being disabled for the rest of our lives. It may happen, you don't know. And that shouldn't mean that you should live your life afraid of that, because you shouldn't. But, you know, it's a sobering reminder that, you know, look, it can happen to anybody. And because of that, we really need to be appreciative of these kinds of issues and the kinds of things that affect this community, because you too can be part of that community at any moment.
Well, and what Tucker has talked about just now, it speaks to the fragility of being a human being.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
We all think we have this control, right? That we have control over everything around us, and we don't. We really don't.
No, the gentleman that I was listening to on the Jonathan Van Ness Getting Curious podcast a few weeks ago was this very strapping, healthy, 6'2" athlete in his, I think, early 20s. And he was jumping on a trampoline, and he just fell just wrong and broke his neck, and ended up, I believe, I'm not sure if he's a quadriplegic. Anyway, he ended up paralyzed and in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. And yeah, you know, so I guess the moral of that story is, you know, the life that you may be fighting for may be your own. So if you can't get on board for other people, you better realize that you're not immune by any stretch. I mean, stroke is one of the most common forms of disability in this country, and the level of stroke that we have in this country is very high. You know, that can happen to anybody. So that's really, really important.
And
Yeah.
life goes on after the diagnosis.
Right.
What happens
Exactly.
to most people, I'm in the school classroom, in the school system. I get to be a model to students. If there ever should happen to be a situation where their life is dramatically changed, they can go back in their memory and go, I remember this woman in my classroom and she
Mhm.
did just fine. So I'm going to be okay too.
Mhm.
Otherwise, they think that suicide is the next best thing. And that's so wrong.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Life does go on. We as a campaign had a movie night a few weeks ago. That's probably over now until after the primaries because we don't have time now. But we took time and we watched a movie through this Netflix interface where you can have a chat going while you watch the same
yeah.
movie together. It's really interesting. Anyway, so we watched this film called Crip Camp.
Mhm.
I don't know if
Mhm.
all of you have seen it, but it's a documentary about this camp back in the looked like 70s, maybe early 70s or so. And it was so great because it followed the lives of these young people through when they went to this camp for young people with disabilities and through to their adult lives, through to today or recent times. And, you know, one of them in particular ended up being actually on Tom Harkin's staff and was part of working toward getting the Americans with Disabilities Act put through. And it was just like, it's just a great, it's a great film. And it's very eye-opening, especially for people who do not have a disability or not a visible one, at least. And it talks about when they did those hunger strikes and those sit-ins where they occupied buildings in Washington. And so it also, I guess what I'm trying to get at is it teaches you about some of the history of the disability and activist disability rights movement, which a lot of us who don't have a disability are ignorant of. We just don't understand all of that history.
If
Yeah,
I
I
didn't
mean-
have my disabilities, I would have no clue what it was like to live like this.
Sure.
Mhm.
But I think even a movie like that and talking about disability camps like what that movie describes, it shows that how people with disabilities can do more than some people without disabilities think they can do, and how much they can actually contribute, and how much that after you leave a camp, like the kids camp that was described in that movie, how much you can contribute in life after going to that camp as a young person. And so if you can be involved and included as a child, you can also be involved and included and contribute as an adult. So
I find society is more, I have to fight more with society in my quality of life than I do if I just did my life myself, I would be fine. It is this attitude of society that goes, no, you can't have that. No, you're taking somebody else's job. What do you think you're doing? Why aren't you home watching TV? Things like that. That expends most of my energy.
Mhm.
It's not pie. It's not pie. It's not everybody can live. Really. And Jen, I want to highlight a point that you made that I think is really important. We talk about inclusion
Mhm.
in schools, for example. And for me, it's always been a rough topic because for me, what was termed as inclusion was actually the most exclusive for me because people can't communicate with me.
Mhm.
But the value of inclusion from a very young age is we see each other as part of the same group.
Right.
And like you said, Jan, you remember, oh, I knew this kid back when I was in 5th grade and they're doing great things. But if you don't see people with disabilities as part of your tribe, your group, then you
Right.
don't have that compassion. And that's a really important point. I think we need to look at as a society.
Mhm.
And again, it's not pie.
If you
Right.
if you teach the inclusion in the classroom, they grow up understanding that when I'm working my job, I'm working right next to that person. That person is my neighbor that I'm to love
Right.
and have empathy with, and they can do the job just as well.
Hmm.
Together, there's no difference in the job functions or the job capability.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important, like Gretchen was saying, to have the inclusion from preschool on up.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really grateful that there was a child who had Down syndrome who was in my son's class and also my son's school class and his Sunday school class. Same little boy. Um, and that was from the time my son was in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, up through many years. And he was friends with this boy with Down syndrome. And I'm so grateful for that because I think that it helped my son to understand that people that appear different than him and may have different forms of abilities, different levels of abilities, are still valuable and still can be your friend and still can do their schoolwork alongside you. I mean, it sounds maybe silly, but I think that's I'm so grateful that my son had that experience of being able to know someone, as a child who was a person with some disabilities. We've got about 10 more minutes left, and I want to get to these two questions. Sophie asks, what improvements or changes would you push to improve HCBS and ICF facilities? And I'll be the first one to say that every industry or every community has its jargon. And so I may need jargon interpretation.
Sure.
And the companies that provide these services. So what improvements or changes would I push to improve HCBS and ICF facilities and the companies that provide those services, both funding wise and systematically wise? I'm lucky I have panelists here. What would you all do? And what are these things?
Well, HCBS,
Yeah.
just a calming community-based services.
Ah, gotcha.
So
Got
just
it.
anything
Yep.
that is provided in the home. ICF.
Is intermediate care facility. So it's basically it's basically not getting services at home. So would you continue the definition, Tucker? Because I'm not sure, it's not my situation, so I don't want to define something wrongly.
Yeah, I've only been in, I guess, like in a rehabilitation setting a couple of times, well, 3 times. Right after my accident, and then after post-surgery one time, and then from healing up from a skin sore. As far as habilitation services, I've never received any. I know that right now, day habs with the current pandemic are like they're just not operating. So now the parents are going to take on all of that, which is a lot, and it can be a lot, depending on the individual. But yeah, I guess that would be the explanation there.
I was going to guess, but it would only be a guess, and I was kind of uncomfortable with that intermediate care facility. It would be kind of like what it describes. It's intermediate between having care being delivered at home versus a rehabilitation care facility that would have more involved and more complexly involved services. That would be a more permanent situation for the person living in that facility.
Yeah, I mean, I would say for either of those, that it sounds to me like the answers for those are the answers for a lot of things, and there's more that I would need to learn, and I would consult with people who know more than me to find out what the better answers are. But increasing funding, e.g., increasing our investments in those things, are investments that pay off, and we would need to increase funding, but also we need to get more caregivers. We need to have more people who do the care, who actually provide the hands-on care.
They
And
would do it if they got paid.
yes,
Right.
yes.
Yes.
And so
yes.
we need to pay people a lot more than we're paying now, like on the level of, 20 plus bucks an hour. And we need to unionize them.
Mhm.
So they have good working conditions, they have bargaining power in relation to these huge corporations that they're working through or for, and they have, benefits and a living wage.
Right.
And I say this over and over, and it applies to so many topics. We talk a good game in the United States. And by we, I mean like people in Washington, okay? People in the state. We talk a good game about how much we value children, or how much we value elders, or how much we value veterans, or how much we value people with disabilities. But when it
But
comes,
our
when push,
healthcare system is the best in the world. But
Right.
we hear that.
when push comes to shove, if you want to know someone's values, show me their checkbook.
Mhm.
hmm
And the United States checkbook does not indicate that we value people over profits. And so what,
Goes out of my own pocket last year for my medical expenses.
Yep.
yeah.
I just,
And so, if we pay people more, and if it's a dignified wage, and if it's a living wage to provide care, I don't guarantee much, but I almost could guarantee you we're going to get more people wanting to do the work.
Oh, absolutely.
this right now we have how many billion people unemployed? I can't find a caregiver.
Right.
There, that is just so asinine to me.
I know, Jan, they can make more money at Walmart.
Mhm.
They literally can make more money working at Super Target or Walmart than caring for another human being. And that should never be true.
But guys, don't you think like one of the giant strand of silver lining that I'm pulling out of the coronavirus situation is that, don't you guys believe too that now we are living in a time due to this pandemic that now more than ever people are actually understanding that we have an infrastructure problem within our healthcare system, and they want it to improve because they're seeing that we don't have we don't have the best healthcare system in the world. When we have shortages of ventilators and nebulizers and the equipment, and then we have such a shortage of nurses and doctors and psychiatrists, et cetera, home care, especially home and community-based services, the people that provide that care, nurses, LPNs, CNAs, all of those people, we have a huge shortage of that. And all it takes is just a little extra something to have these huge gaps turn into, or like little tiny cracks that we've been not putting Band-Aids over, turn into giant canyons that we cannot fill. And so we have a unique opportunity, I think, to really capitalize on the fact that everyone is coming together and understanding that people who provide that work are actually worthy of a good wage, because we need them. We need them. We depend on them. I mean, when have we ever been alive in our entire lifetime where every day people go outside and applaud for the people that provide healthcare? We're in a really unique and genuinely awesome moment. And I think
that silver lining would be awesome if it would stay. But
Mhm.
once we go back to our daily life, people will forget it fast.
unless we keep pushing that. You know what I mean? If we can incentivize colleges to, offer these programs for people so that they can earn to get into those careers where they can earn a better wage and have a career and have it be a rewarding work where you're helping someone and you can feel good about yourself.
And you know what, Tucker? The issue is you were talking about clapping for the healthcare workers, they're only clapping for like the EMS. They're only clapping for the hospital workers. They're only clapping for the people who work in the emergency rooms. They're still not clapping for the person who comes over to your house and helps you do your daily living activities.
Mhm.
They're not clapping for my home health care aide who helps me clean my house. They're not clapping for those people. They're clapping for the people that they can see at the hospital, basically. And they should be, but
Mhm.
the people that we work with, they're not clapping for those people.
I know I am.
Yeah.
I am too, but I mean, when they leave my house, nobody's out on the sidewalk clapping for my person.
Right.
You're not
You know.
visible. You're not visible. You're not.
Yeah.
Right. And I hope that that's something that does come out of this, is that all these people that are essential workers,
Mhm.
I hope that when this dies down enough, that we, the pandemic calms down enough, that we sort of, aren't just worried about our day-to-day survival here, that I won't, and that more people in politics and people in power and regular everyday just people not running for office, that we don't forget that those essential workers kept us fed and tried to keep us safe,
Right.
and delivered our mail and all of those things, and that we and came into our homes and took care of us if that was the
Yeah.
case, and that we make sure that we continue to advocate for them, because change never, ever, ever happens from the top down. It happens from the bottom up.
All the time. Every
And,
time.
and that's why that's why I still go watch Crip Camp if you haven't, because
Right.
it shows you how in a microcosm in that film, it's a really good example of how the changes in the Americans with Disabilities Act didn't happen because some politicians in DC woke up one day and decided that people with disabilities have value and they should support those laws. That happened because those people took over that building and brought all kinds of publicity down on those people and shamed them into
Mhm.
finally doing the right thing.
People,
Well, that's how
People
the
with-
ACA got passed. If it hadn't been for people in disabilities literally putting themselves outside of Mitch McConnell's office, refusing to leave, and having to have the Capitol security pull them, physically rip them from their wheelchairs and carry them out, I don't think that would have gotten passed in as much as it did.
okay, Tucker, and people with disabilities were the ones saying, I'm the person with the disability. I'm the person talking, and I'm valuable. Nobody from the top down said people with disabilities were valuable. It was the people with disabilities themselves saying, hey, I'm valuable. I'm here. Look at me. Don't not see me because you think I'm invisible. I'm right here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the disability civil rights movement is every bit as strong as any other civil rights movement has ever been. Even more so because there's been more of a struggle. And there's a lot of worth in that and a lot to learn from it.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And it takes all the parts. I mean, it starts and it ultimately gets done from activists at the grassroots level. And then you have to have some dum-dums like me sitting in positions of power who are at least smart enough to listen to you and are going to push it from the inside, because you can't, so we all have to become this synergy working together to get things done. It takes all of us. It takes hardcore activists on the streets, and it takes people sitting in those seats with the ability to actually cast a vote, on a bill. So it takes all of us. We have one last question here from Jessica. What is our plan to ensure that people with disabilities are able to get medical devices and prosthetics they need to live a better and more fulfilling life? If any of you have anything to say about this, have at it. That's a great question. And I mean, obviously I am a proponent of a universal single payer healthcare system that in my world would cover medical devices and prosthetics. So you would never have to have some kind of separate fight for that. But that's years down the road, unfortunately, if it ever happens. In the shorter term, I don't know the answer. Jessica, if you have suggestions or answers, I find that occasionally people ask me a question and they already have some great suggestions themselves when they ask me the question. I would love to hear it. But I mean, in short, I would do whatever I could, and I would consult with people that know more than me, which is what I always do when I am faced with, what would you do on this policy? Well, if I'm not an expert in that policy, I'm going to go ask people who are, and I'm going to find out what it is they recommend that we do. Do you, any of you know about different devices and prosthetics and how those are paid for and issues regarding that?
American Prosthetics has denied me my braces, so I don't have anything like that anymore. I haven't figured out where to go for that. I've tried like this Spina Bifida Association nationally, things nationally, organizations nationally. I haven't gotten anywhere yet.
And Jan, is that the same? Are they using that same excuse that, well, this is, if you have an illness that you're never going to recover from, then we're not going to provide any kind of help to you, essentially?
They're not obligated for maintenance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
I'm not really sure. American Prosthetics has just said that they cannot provide braces for me anymore.
I don't think a lot of people realize this, but insurance companies will not cover hearing aids. Period. And that's a huge imposition for people. You can't afford several $1,000s for hearing aids.
That's a huge problem, and that's the current version of the so-called Medicare for All bill would cover hearing aids. It would cover dental, which is dental care is a huge problem for people in this country,
especially with those with disabilities.
So the gap is the product, the agency will provide the product when they get paid. The insurance will say, we'll pay for the product when we get the product.
Mm-hmm.
But the two never meet. There's that gap. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we'll pay for the product when we have the product. We'll give you the product after it's paid for. They don't ever come together.
Mm-hmm.
and if you think that's an accident, there's some, I'm sorry to tell you, there's some lawyers that are smarter than me that write that bullshit up.
So Tucker,
Yeah.
Tucker, weren't you working on some advocacy at the federal level with some legislation dealing with how to do things with the durable medical equipment that had something to do with not the Integration Act. There was, I'm sorry, I can't finish my question because I'm trying to remember some things and I lost it in my head.
Well, yeah, there was supposed to be, I mean, this COVID stuff has really ruined everything. Yeah, that we were going to be in conversations to go out to DC to lobby because for someone in a wheelchair, I know that uses a wheelchair, with power chairs, this ended up being covered that if you used a power wheelchair, you could not get it repaired. So like if there needed to be repairs made to that, I really wish Jen Wolf was on the conference because she's far more well versed in this. But if you needed a repair done to your wheelchair before you could get a brand new one, which is usually every 5 years, 4 to 5 years, or whenever your insurance company says that yes, okay, this is a period of time that in which you should receive a new chair. You couldn't get things fixed and have it be covered. So right now there has been some changes in the CRT that I believe that, yeah, I'm talking out of school here, but yeah. So really, there are some things that are being worked on, but we're not there yet, and we need to be, because imagine, utilizing. It would be like for an able-bodied person to say, for someone to say to you, okay, well, you're supposed to work or do the things that you do each day, but your legs, no, or we're going to take your car away, or
Yeah.
take away your arms, or and oh, but you should be able to continue with living the life that you lead.
Yep. Because I always
I'm so sorry to interrupt you guys, but unfortunately, our captioner has to leave to go to another event.
Oh, no.
We thought an hour and 15 or so was and actually it's been an hour and 45 has been enough, but there's so much to talk about and never enough time. So we're gonna have to wrap up, but maybe we can another one of these events. If not before the primary, sure as heck we're gonna do it if I win the primary, that's for sure. So thank everybody for being here. Thank you, Tucker. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Gretchen. Thank you. And thank you, Jan. And thank you, everybody, for being here. And if you have questions, as always, email me at Kimberly@KimberlyForIowa.com, Kimberly@KimberlyForIowa.com. And Jan will send you an email, and thanks, everybody. And thank you so much for being here. And have a great afternoon.
Let's do this again.
We should. We will.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good to see you all
Jan.
virtually.
Thank you.
Bye, Jan.
Bye. Thank you.
See you guys.
This is better than town hall. Thank you.
Thank you.